The Arizona sun scorched the pavement of Sunridge Estates, a retirement community where peace and palm trees were supposed to reign supreme. I had moved here after 30 years as a firefighter, thinking I'd earned a bit of quiet. Instead, I walked straight into a battlefield disguised as suburbia, and at the heart of it all was Karen Whitmore, the self-declared queen of the HOA. Karen was the kind of woman who made rules faster than anyone could break them. 60-something, tan from tanning beds, and always armed with a clipboard. She drove around in a bubblegum pink golf cart with a vanity plate that read Roulet's won. Her power didn't come from any official badge. No, it came from the fear she saw people for weeds in their garden, demanding garage doors remain closed, and God help you if your trash bin wasn't pulled in by noon. I tried to stay under her radar, quiet mornings on the porch, tinkering in the garage, waving politely during her daily patrol. But like every tyrant in history, she eventually pushed too far. It started with an extension cord. The HOA utility shed near the community garden had a single outdoor outlet. It was meant for everyone, shared for leaf blowers, power washers, maybe a radio during block parties. But for the past 6 weeks, Karen had claimed it as her personal charging station for her golf cart. Every evening without fail, she'd park Roulet's one right beside the shed and plug in like she was docking a spaceship. It didn't matter if someone else needed it. It didn't matter that it was community property. Karen saw it, wanted it, and took it. One Saturday morning, I needed to pressure wash my driveway. Dust from a monsoon storm had caked the surface, and my son was visiting with his grandkids the next day. I walked over to the shed with my equipment in hand, only to find Karen's cart blocking the outlet. Plugged in as always, I waited for 30 minutes. She never showed. I rang her doorbell. No answer. Finally, I unplugged the cart, coiled the cord off to the side, and plugged in my washer. 15 minutes of cleaning later, I left everything as I found it. The next morning, a bright red violation notice flapped in the breeze on my front door. Tampering with HOA property subject to fines and legal consequences. Signed, Karen Whitmore, HOA president. I stared at the paper in disbelief. Tampering, it wasn't her outlet. It wasn't even her shed. And I hadn't broken or damaged anything. I'd simply used a shared amenity. I walked to her house, trying to be civil. Karen, can we talk for a second? She met me on her porch, arms folded, sunglasses on like she was preparing for a mugshot. I already filed the report, she said flatly. Karen, I waited. No one was using the outlet. It's not reserved for you. It is, she snapped. I use it every night. You disconnected my cart and risked damaging the battery. That's HOA property now. I laughed. I shouldn't have. That was when the color drained from her face and something shifted in her posture, like a general who'd just been challenged in her own war room. If you think you're going to disrespect HOA rules, she hissed, you'll regret it. I'm not disrespecting rules, I replied. I'm standing up to someone abusing them. Her smile came slow and smug. Then I guess I'll see you in court. I thought she was bluffing. I thought this would end with a warning, maybe a petty fine. But 2 days later, I got a summons delivered to my door. Karen had filed a civil complaint in county court. I sat down, paper trembling in my hand. Unplugging her golf cart wasn't just a neighborhood spat anymore. It was war, and I had just become her next target. The courtroom was barely larger than a high school classroom, but Karen Whitmore strutted in like she was entering the Supreme Court. Dressed in a crisp navy pantsuit, clipboard still in hand, she shot me a look that said this was more than a legal proceeding, this was punishment. I sat quietly at the defendant's table, wearing jeans and a clean button-down. I wasn't here to start a fight. I was here because I refused to be bullied. Karen had filed a civil complaint accusing me of unauthorized use of HOA property and willful damage to essential equipment, all stemming from the 10 seconds it took me to unplug her precious pink golf cart. Her claims were exaggerated, even absurd, but she didn't need them to be true. She just needed them to sound official enough to make me pay. The judge wasn't hearing our case yet. This was only a preliminary hearing to determine if it would proceed. Still, Karen acted like she'd already won. She even brought 2 HOA board members as character witnesses, though both looked more nervous than loyal. Your Honor, she declared when the judge finally called us forward, this man, Mr. Blake, put the community at risk. My golf cart is not a toy, it's a tool. I use it to enforce HOA policies. It needs consistent charging to operate safely. His actions were reckless and, frankly, dangerous. The judge, a patient woman in her 40s with a measured tone, nodded. Once, Mr. Blake, your response. I stood slowly, hand steady. Your Honor, I used a shared HOA outlet. Mrs. Whitmore has been monopolizing it daily, sometimes overnight, and I had no other means to power my equipment. The cart wasn't damaged. I simply unplugged it just like anyone would a vacuum or leaf blower. This wasn't malicious. It was necessary. Karen scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. He has a history of undermining authority. The judge raised a brow. Let's stick to the incident, Mrs. Whitmore. But Karen couldn't help herself. He's been non-compliant ever since he moved and ever attends HOA meetings, doesn't support community initiatives, and has a tendency to challenge directives. I didn't need to speak. The judge's expression was enough. She was already questioning Karen's motives. The hearing adjourned with a decision to move forward to a formal court date, but something shifted that day. Karen hadn't expected pushback, she expected fear. I gave her none. Outside, I caught up with the 2 board members she'd brought with her. Neither made eye contact. One of them, Marla, a kind widow who mostly kept to herself, finally leaned in. "You're not wrong. You know," she whispered. "She's been running the HOA like a dictatorship. People are afraid to say anything." That small confession lit a fuse in me. Back home, I started digging. I reviewed the HOA bylaws, the dusty PDF that no one had touched in years. It was clear. The outlet was common property. There were no assigned rights, no formal scheduling system, nothing granting Karen exclusive access. I began knocking on doors. Most people were hesitant to talk at first, but when I explained what Karen was doing, how she was using their dues to power her personal vehicle for hours at a time, they opened up. Stories poured out, threatened fines over wind chimes, warnings about sidewalk chalk, violations for leaving a porch light on too long. Karen wasn't just overstepping, she was abusing power. I gathered written statements, dated photographs, and even a few video clips. One neighbor, a tech-savvy retiree named Sam, had a drone recording of Karen yelling at kids riding bikes too close to her cart. Another, Mr. Leonard, said he once avoided using the shed outlet for his oxygen backup generator because Karen would throw a fit. All of it painted the same picture: control, intimidation, manipulation. I organized the evidence, printed it, and labeled it with tabs. Karen wanted a war in court. I was going to bring the truth. And for the first time in months, I could feel the neighborhood stirring, whispers at the mailbox, side glances during walks. The fear Karen had relied on for so long was beginning to fade. She had dragged me into court thinking I'd fold. But instead, she'd pulled on a thread she couldn't control, and it was unraveling fast. The courtroom was cooler than expected, but the tension inside made the air feel thick. I sat at the defendant's table, a tidy stack of evidence at my side: documents, photos, written statements, and HOA bylaws, all labeled and neatly organized. Across from me, Karen Whitmore tapped her acrylic nails on the polished table, feigning calm but radiating smugness. She wore the same navy pantsuit from the preliminary hearing, but this time she added a brooch shaped like a gavala, as if dressing for victory. Her 2 loyal board members sat behind her, whispering nervously. The room wasn't packed, but a handful of neighbors had shown up, including Marla and Sam, who gave me quiet nods of encouragement. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Linda Garcia entered with an even stride, took her seat, and reviewed the folder in front of her. "Ms. Whitmore, you may present your case." Karen stood and launched into her performance. "Your Honor," she began, her voice laced with exaggerated concern. "This case is about safety, responsibility, and the sanctity of HOA property. The defendant, Mr. Blake, not only tampered with my electric vehicle while it was charging, but he did so without warning or permission. I rely on my golf cart to enforce HOA regulations. His actions were not just disrespectful, they were dangerous." She paused for dramatic effect, then added, "Furthermore, I fear this kind of behavior undermines the authority necessary to maintain community order." Judge Garcia nodded politely. "Do you have any evidence of damage?" Karen faltered just slightly. "Well, no permanent damage occurred," she admitted, "but the risk was there. Lithium batteries can be volatile when unplugged improperly. It was reckless." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Did you file a maintenance report or request a professional inspection of the cart?" Karen hesitated. "No, I handled it internally." "Very well," Judge Garcia said, turning to me. "Mr. Blake." I stood slowly, heart pounding but voice steady. "Your Honor, I want to be very clear. I did not tamper with anything. I unplugged a golf cart from a shared HOA outlet, an outlet listed in the HOA bylaws as communal property. I needed to operate my power washer, and after waiting for over 30 minutes with no sign of Ms. Whitmore, I used the plug. Nothing was damaged, no rules were broken." I stepped forward, offering a highlighted copy of the bylaws. "Please note, Section 5(3), I said, which states that all utility connections in common areas are open for equal use, with no clause granting exclusive rights. Additionally, here are photographs documenting how the cart was plugged in overnight, sometimes for up to 18 hours without scheduling or consideration for others." I handed over a folder containing time-stamped photos and 2 signed statements. One is from Mr. Leonard, who was afraid to use the outlet for his oxygen backup out of fear of confrontation. The other is from Mr. Sam Bright, who recorded a video of Ms. Whitmore berating children for riding bikes too close to her cart. I submit these not to smear character, but to show a pattern of abuse and misuse of shared resources and authority. Karen shot up from her seat. "Objection. These statements are hearsay and irrelevant." Judge Garcia glanced up, unamused. "They are signed and submitted under penalty of perjury." Ms. Whitmore, overruled. Karen sank back into her chair. I continued, "This isn't about a plug. It's about power, how one individual has used their position to intimidate, dominate, and control a community. I wasn't the first target. I may not even be the worst off, but I stood up." Silence followed. The judge folded her hands. I've reviewed the documents, I've heard both arguments, and I have to say, the facts speak clearly. Karen straightened, almost smug again. Judge Garcia continued, her tone colder now. This complaint is without merit. Mr. Blake operated within the community guidelines. There is no evidence of harm, and there is considerable evidence that Ms. Whitmore exceeded her authority. Karen blinked, mouth slightly open. Therefore the judge went on. I'm dismissing the case with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm issuing a $1,200 fine against Ms. Whitmore for misuse of the judicial process, filing a frivolous lawsuit, and abusing her position as HOA president. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face drained of color. Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked. Karen stood in stunned silence, frozen. As I packed up my binder, I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply nodded to Marla and Sam and walked out of the courtroom into the sunlit parking lot. It wasn't over yet, but the empire Karen had built on fear. It had just taken its first serious hit. Karen Whitmore didn't show her face at the HOA clubhouse for a full week after the ruling. Her pink golf cart, usually seen zipping from lawn to lawn like a neon missile, sat motionless outside her garage. Its charging cable conspicuously absent. No one missed her. The $1,200 fine handed down by the judge had hit harder than any of us expected, not just financially, but symbolically. It wasn't just a punishment. It was a public unmasking. For years, Karen had weaponized rules to control us, disguising her power grabs as community standards. But now, the illusion had shattered, and the community was watching. Within days of the courtroom fallout, the neighborhood began to shift. Quietly at first, like the first breeze before a thunderstorm, people who'd once avoided eye contact with her began talking openly at mailboxes. Driveways became informal meeting spots where neighbors swapped stories, shared documents, and started asking hard questions about how much control one person should ever have in a community of equals. Then came the petitions. Sam and Marla, armed with clipboards and polite determination, began gathering signatures to call a special board meeting. The goal was simple: a vote to review and potentially remove Karen from her position as HOA president. At first, I kept a respectful distance. I hadn't started this war to win a title or a spotlight, I just wanted fairness. But when they asked if I'd speak during the meeting, I said yes without hesitation. If people were finally ready to reclaim their voices, I wasn't about to sit on mine. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed tighter than a July 4th barbecue. Even residents who rarely left their homes showed up, some with walkers, others with folded lawn chairs and quiet resolve. Karen arrived late, her once dominant stride reduced to a stiff shuffle. She wore sunglasses indoors and kept her head down as if the room might forget she existed if she just didn't look up. They didn't forget. One by one, residents took the microphone. No yelling, no drama, just voices that had been silenced for too long, finally rising. Stories of fines for bird feeders, warnings for garden gnomes, and threats for porch flags. A pattern emerged, one of intimidation masked as order. Then it was my turn. I moved here to find peace, I said, not to be policed over how long my garage door stays open. The incident with the outlet wasn't just about electricity, it was about how rules are used to divide us instead of bring us together. We deserve better. Applause followed, not wild or theatrical, just sincere. Karen stood, clutching a prepared statement, but the words never landed. Whatever power she once wielded no longer held weight. The room had made up its mind. The vote was decisive by a margin of 42-5. Karen was removed from her position. A new interim board was elected. Marla, Sam, and 3 other volunteers who promised transparency, fairness, and a return to common sense. Their first order of business: locking the utility outlet and installing a key checkout system so every resident could access it equally. Their second, auditing the HOA's finances to see just how far Karen's influence had reached. The morning after the vote, I took a walk. The sun was rising over Sunridge Estates, casting long golden rays across neatly trimmed lawns and stucco walls. For the first time since I moved in, the neighborhood felt alive in the best way, not with paranoia, but possibility. People waved. One man even honked his horn and gave me a thumbs up. As I passed Karen's house, her blinds twitched. She watched, but she didn't come out. Her golf cart sat silent in the driveway, powerless in every sense of the word. I didn't feel victorious, I felt relieved. Later that week, Marla dropped by with a plate of lemon bars and a suggestion. "You should run for the board next election," she said with a grin. "You've already shown us what standing up looks like." I smiled. I think I've done my part. Time for others to lead. Sunridge Estates was far from perfect, but it was ours again. And whenever someone tried to pull rank with the rules, we remembered what happened when Karen took me to court for unplugging her golf cart, how she laughed in the beginning, and how she walked away with a $1,200 reminder that power, real power, doesn't come from a title, it comes from truth, and truth had finally taken charge.